Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you, as always, by Inside the Penguins, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined, as always, by Nick Horwat, and we have some injury news, some surgery news that we have to dissect through the Pittsburgh Penguins. 3 cases come out yesterday from General Manager and President of Hockey Operations, Kyle Dubas. We'll go through each one of them. Kris Letang, John Ludvig, and Matt Nieto all go under the knife this offseason, looking for different bounce backs, right? Different returns and different slates for different surgeries. We'll discuss all of them here in the next 30 minutes. And then we'll close out this show talking a little bit about the WHL playoffs, because we've been following along with first-round pick Brayden Yager, and his team took home the WHL Championship yesterday. So we'll discuss that a little bit to close out the show. But Horwat, let's start it off with these surgeries. A lot of news coming all at once about the Pittsburgh Penguins, and let's start with the biggest name on this list, and that is Kris Letang having surgery on a fractured finger. He's expected to be recovered in about 8 weeks, so no effect on his, well, maybe on his offseason, because we know Kris Letang was already in the gym this offseason, but no effect on training camp or the beginning of next season.
Yeah, it's not going to affect him too much. It's shocking that this is the only thing that the Penguins announced, considering the way both Kyle Dubas and Mike Sullivan talked about Kris Letang at their end-of-season press conferences. Of the quotes were warrior, and he's getting second opinions on all that ails him. There's a lot to unpack still, I think, with Kris Letang. But if he was getting second opinions, and this is maybe just the first one they announced, or that everything's going to be okay without surgery, and it's not worth making the announcement for. It'll be interesting to see if anything else happens. At this point, though, you would figure surgeries would have happened, right?
I mean, I would have expected it to happen at this point. And we all know what happened last offseason with Jake Gensel's ankle. It was something that not a lot of people really had an eye on or a beat on. And then later in the summer, they said, all right, he underwent surgery. They were expecting it to heal throughout the summer. It just wasn't able to. And he ended up going to the beauty league, and playing on it and testing it out. And he figured, all right, I'm going to need the surgery before this season starts. So maybe it's one of those instances, again, where Kris Letang wants to let it heal without surgery, and they're just going to see how it progresses throughout the offseason. But like you mentioned, Kyle Dubas made it widely known during the press conference that it is not just one injury, that there is a laundry list here that we are unaware of, saying, quote, Kris was going to get a second opinion on all that ails him, like you said, which is significant. He's played with it the whole year, but it's likely going to head that way, surgery-wise. And then we'll have an update once he makes a decision one way or the other on it. I don't know. Again, I've never tried to play hockey with a fractured finger, but I don't know if that would fall under the significant category the way that Kyle Dubas was speaking about a month ago.
Yeah, it's a bit different than I hear all that ails him that makes you automatically assume there are a couple of things there. It's not just one. And then when you hear that it's just a fractured finger, and you immediately go, don't get me wrong, that might be hard. That might be a struggle, especially considering you use a hockey stick with your hands. It might be a bit of a struggle, but also I don't think that entails the warrior title or the all that ails him title, considering the guy had a stroke last year, also played through that, or not played through it, but made it past that. I'd say that's a pretty heavy warrior title right there. So I would assume there is more to it that either is perfectly okay and we're just going to move past and we won't even discuss it the next season because he'll be healthy, he'll be recovered, or there's still something else down the line that we're just waiting on. It's going to be interesting to see and just keep an eye on. At the moment, though, I think we can say that he'll be okay in 8. You said 8 weeks, 2 months?
8 weeks, yep.
He'll be good in 8 weeks, and he won't miss any time, and we can have discussions about his actual play and if we believe he's still going to be good at the age of 37.
I mean, Letang was spotted in the gym a few weeks back on his trainer's Instagram story with the caption, trying to keep him out of the gym, just texts unannounced. I mean, Kris Letang is a guy that we've always known is a gym rat. He's always in the gym in the offseason. That's one of the reasons that the Penguins felt comfortable giving him that 6-year extension at the age of, what was he at the time? 35 years old, 34 years old, because this is a guy that takes care of his body. right? So if there was anybody on the Penguins to deal with a laundry list of undisclosed injuries, it's going to be Kris Letang, because this is a guy that is so finely in tune with everything that's going on with his body that, he's going to be able to handle it. But again, it's still concerning considering he is 37 years old with his birthday a couple weeks ago, turning 37, and the fact that he's going to push past it no matter what. So again, he played all 82 games this season. There was no, outside of maybe you said you might have seen him limp a few times, there was no indication that he was dealing with an injury, let alone that many injuries to institute him being called a warrior by Mike Sullivan, to all of the praise that he received in the locker room on locker room cleanout. So this is a guy that might play through it anyway. So will he be fully healthy? We might never know.
Yeah, we'll never know. It's going to be one of those things that it's like Evgeny Malkin. Once he retires, we're going to hear about the laundry list of surgeries he's going to have to go through. Whereas with Letang, I mean, I don't even want to totally say, yeah, I saw him limp once or twice, because it's not like he was wearing a cast. It's not like he was wearing a boot. It's also hockey. These guys are just kind of broken. But that's the thing. It's like some of the things that I've been told about what he might be ailed with. He wasn't wearing any sort of medical bandaging or cast, like I said, or splits or whatever you wear. I've only broken my wrist once. I had a cast on. I don't know anything else other than he wasn't on crutches. There was no obvious sign of an injury for him. So who knows? Maybe he's fighting through it. Who knows what the rest of the summer holds? If he's already working out, clearly he's not in that much pain in certain areas to do workouts. He's a fascinating creature too when it comes to being a hockey player, staying healthy, being in the gym, and regardless of what might be ailing him, he's got this drive to stay in shape, remain at the top of his game, and if anything else, the Penguins will have someone driven to be the best that he can be.
Yeah, and be available, especially at an advanced age, right? Be available, play through injuries. That's something that, Kris Letang is known for at this point, and he's just adding to that aura, adding to that legacy as the years go on. You don't want that to be the case, but man, I mean, that's why you get the moniker of warrior from a head coach. But Letang has 4 years left on that deal. Like I mentioned, he did play all 82 games this past season, scored 51 points, and to make that even more impressive, 45 of those 51 points all came at 5-on-5. Only 5 points on the power play, all assists, and 1 shorthanded assist as well. But entering his age 37 season, does this laundry list of injuries give you any concern with that much time left on his contract?
It just might. It just might have to, because he's not a guy that's been healthy his whole career to start with. I mean, he missed, was it the entire playoffs in 2017?
Most of it, yeah. The Ron Hainsey playoffs.
Yeah, I forget how much of that playoffs he missed, but he missed a lot of the playoffs in 2017, and the Penguins had to win their second cup essentially without him. He's obviously had the 2 strokes, like I mentioned. There's been other injuries. I mean, when you discuss the Penguins core of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Kris Letang, it doesn't take long for you to all of a sudden go, for all 3 of them, man, imagine what their careers would be if they were fully healthy. Imagine if they had the Alex Ovechkin bug, where, hey, they'll get hurt on occasion, but it's nothing that serious, and they're battling through it and putting up ridiculous stats. And that goes for all 3 of them. Letang is included in that. I mean, I'm trying to remember some other injuries he's had, but if there's a new kind of unknown list to put into that resume, I don't want to quite say it's concerning, but it's something to monitor without doubt, because there was definitely times this past season where he didn't look like himself. Maybe there was something holding him back, but we are not going to know per se. And if it becomes visible again this upcoming season, then it's going to become a huge concern, considering the amount of time he has left. He's not going to want to go anywhere. The Penguins aren't going to want to send him anywhere. Maybe he just may have to miss some time for the first time in 2 years. I mean, for the first time since last year, because it's the first time all 3 of them have played all 82 games. Yeah, which that in itself goes to show how rare it is that those guys play every game and how healthy they can be.
Yeah, these injuries, I mean, they are concerning. He's 37 years
Mhm.
old. Who knows how many injuries and how big the injuries are. So it is concerning, especially knowing that he's going to be 40, 41 by the end of that
Yeah.
contract. And it's not expected that he's going to be moved on from, especially considering how much he is viewed as a guy that should end his career in Pittsburgh. I mean, that's what the release was when he signed that contract. It said Penguin for life. And that's what he wants. That's what the organization to this point has stated that they want. So for 4 more years, this is a guy that has dealt with a lot of injuries and looks like he's going to continue to deal with injuries. The things that give me hope that it's not going to affect his game too much are, one, he still put up 51 points this year while dealing with probably more than 2 injuries, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a significant injury. There's probably another one as well. So who knows how many injuries he dealt with all season long. And you saw it early in the year. He was playing some of his best hockey. And if some of that was starting to, ail him at the beginning of the season, he was doing that while playing his best hockey that we've seen in multiple years. And not only that, he doesn't have to be the number one defenseman next
Yep.
year. He doesn't have to play 29 minutes a night. He finished with about 24 and a half minutes a night this past season. There is another number one defenseman on the team, and there's another top pairing. If you give Kris Letang, if it's P.O. Joseph, it might be a little underwhelming, but if you give Kris Letang a defensive defenseman, bring that guy in, that's your second pairing. Erik Karlsson, Marcus Pettersson, no matter where you put them on the graphic, that's your top pairing next season. So he's not going to be asked to do as much next year. He already wasn't asked to do as much this year. Taken off the power play, he did get a lot more penalty kill time, which might have played into the amount of injuries that he had. But again, that's hockey. But there's a little concern for me. But at the same time, as time wears on, you're hoping that his role becomes lesser and lesser, and the Penguins are asking less of him because they've asked a lot of him so much for the past decade plus that you would assume that the next couple of years, Erik Karlsson's going to take that mantle. You would hope in a couple of years, Owen Pickering steps up and is able to take some of that off of his shoulders. So you're hoping that his role becomes lesser and lesser as time goes on, and hopefully he's not affected by as many injuries. But I do think that there is a little bit of cause for concern, especially considering the unknown that we're dealing with right now. What are the other injuries? Is he going to have to do a Jake Gensel and have a surgery late into the offseason and miss some of the regular season or even the training camp? For a guy at the age of 37, that could seriously affect or significantly affect the beginning of the year for him. And the Penguins, as we've seen, to get off to a slow start, it is very hard to climb back into it. But let's move over and talk about the other two injuries. Less significant names, but more significant injuries for John Ludvig and Matt Nieto. Let's start with John Ludvig. He had surgery to repair the extensor tendon in his left wrist. He's expected to miss 4 to 6 months due to that injury. That places his return around training camp. Could miss an early portion of next season. The earliest return 4 months would be the beginning of training camp, end of August. Probably a little bit of a ramp up with individual and unorganized team activities, or he could miss until mid-October, which could miss the first week or two of the season. 33 points for Ludvig last season in his first taste of Penguins hockey. Brought a physicality that really hasn't been in the Penguins organization in a while, and he was a willing fighter. How often have we said that about a Pittsburgh Penguin of late? Has 1 year left on his deal, but how, Horwat, would you view Ludvig entering his second season in Pittsburgh?
He's going to enter sort of as the Chad Ruhwedel type, that seventh guy. I think because of the way Jack St. Ivany really took off down the stretch. Who knows what happens with Ryan Shea this offseason, but with the way that at least Jack St. Ivany kind of took that mantle, it pushed Ludvig down a little bit. I mean, there were parts of the season whenever Ludvig was playing where you kind of looked at him as, he could easily be a sixth option, a left side guy or right side. I forget which side he is now specifically, but could be the guy to fill in wherever on that third pairing. But with the way the younger guys kind of came in, I mean, I guess he's also one of the youngest on the team, but the way these new faces came in and sort of just stole the role, the way Kyle Dubas wanted someone to. They just leapfrogged themselves over Ludvig, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's going to be a useful piece as that Chad Ruhwedel type, maybe not necessarily in the same vein of consistency, but should still be useful as a seventh face that when you need him, whenever he's called upon, he's going to give you exactly what he always will, which is that physicality, which is that growing game, because it feels like there's a little bit to be unlocked defensively. We see him score a couple of times too. Not that he's an offensive guy, but he did all of the things properly for a young rookie in the league, which is make a name for yourself one way, find success in others, and time to start growing in the main way. So could be a fun year for him. I'm interested to see what he can do, period. And this injury also does just beat him down the depth chart a bit.
Yeah, that's the big thing that I'm looking at, is because he's going to miss that training camp where you would expect there to be a similar type of competition that we saw last year in training camp, where Mark Pesic was brought in, where Libor Hayek was brought in. They're going to bring in names to push these guys to truly earn that third defense pairing role. Now, they did it last year, and nobody really took the bull by the horns until the last month of the season, but Jack St. Ivany is going to be given that shot out of the gate. Now he has a RFA tag on him. He needs to be signed to a new contract. So too does Ryan Shea, who's a UFA. So too does a guy in Jack Rathbone, who had a really solid end of the season for Wilkes-Barre. With that missing the beginning of camp, potentially, and missing potentially all of camp, John Ludvig's probably going to have to start at the American Hockey League level next year and work his way back to an NHL role. Now, that willingness to fight endeared him to the Penguins fan base, and I think endeared him to Mike Sullivan and the coaching staff as well. Sticking up for your teammates, being physical, playing that type of game. The Penguins need more of that. He's a guy that defensively still had some quirks to work on, but at the same time, this is a guy who hadn't really played an NHL game before coming to the Penguins this past season. So there is a little bit of a learning curve. He only had 33 games, and even those games were kind of spread out through some scratches, through some rotating door of third pairing, some injuries that he faced, obviously getting injured in his NHL debut against the Dallas Stars. So the injuries were a big concern for him in year one. Getting his feet underneath him at the NHL level was a concern for him at year one. With 1 year left on that contract, I think the Penguins are excited to see what he could do if he can stay healthy once he returns from this wrist surgery. So if he can do that, if he can build it up in the AHL level and then become that third pairing defenseman, I think it's a great thing for the Penguins, and I think he's a solid piece for them depth-wise. Now, is he going to be a guy that the Penguins look to, like you mentioned, to be a top six guy? No. But could he slot into that Chad Ruhwedel role? 100%. I don't know if he's going to ever be as dependable as Chad Ruhwedel. That's a tall order for anybody sitting in that role, because Ruhwedel played it as good as anybody can to be able to sit up and eat nachos 9 days out of 10 and then go down and play at a high level on day 10 and then go back up into the press box right after that. Ruhwedel was truly great at doing that, but I'm intrigued to see if Ludvig can get himself into that role and really make himself that name going forward, because I mean, Ruhwedel had 8 years? He was the longest tenured Penguin, one of the longer tenured Penguins before his trade to the New York Rangers at the trade deadline. You can stick around if you can successfully play in that role. And I think that's a role that John Ludvig could find himself in going forward.
Yeah, just stay healthy, stay ready. And whenever you're in, play at the top of your game and play as if you're still earning a spot, essentially. It's tough to do. It's tough to sit out that long and remain consistent. But if he's able to pull that off, it's a definite way to have a steady NHL paycheck and a steady role, not riding buses in the AHL.
Let's talk about Matt Nieto a little bit here. Underwent successful MCL surgery on his left knee in early May, and that is important to note because in January, he had surgery, laparoscopic-wise, on his right knee. So double knees for Matt Nieto. He is expected to miss 6 to 7 months with this latest surgery, which pins his return between November and December. So guaranteed to miss all of training camp and to miss the beginning of the 2024-25 season. Expect him to start the season on long-term injured reserve. I think that much is a given at this point. But he also missed the final 60 games of this past season. Horwat, the big question here is, do you think we see Matt Nieto suit up for another Penguins game at some point in his career?
I honestly don't think so. It's tough to really come to that conclusion considering we never got to see what he could do. He played 20-some games, and people weren't big fans of what he brought in the first place in those 20-some games, but it's still not – that doesn't feel like enough time to sort of mold with the team, considering how long it took the entire Penguins roster to mold with itself. this year, and he just wasn't part of the final product. He wasn't part of that run that they went on. We don't know what he could have brought down the stretch. Maybe the heightened intensity could have changed things for him. Maybe he found a certain rhythm with a different line mate. Who knows how that all could have gone? That's exactly. We don't know what he could have been with certain players, with certain faces, and it's unfortunate. And like Kyle Dubas said in his end of season press conference about Nieto, he just feels terrible for him. It's unfortunate that he had setbacks with that first knee surgery, it sounded like, and then now he had to have this second one. It's tough to pinpoint exactly what happened when and where. I mean, busting up both knees that's hard to recover from. So obviously they said 6 to 7 months. He'll open the season on LTIR, and I'm not sure if he comes off of it. Dubas has managed a team before where there's always just consistently been names on that list that they called it Robidaw Island for a reason. I know he wasn't the one that started it, but he kind of had to marinate and use that same tactic. And listen, like Nieto's contract isn't as big as the ones that the Maple Leafs were throwing on LTIR, but for 1 year, if it comes down to it, throwing him on that would be easier than buying him out, even if the buyout is cheap. It's just more or less the proper thing to do too. The guy's hurt; he's not even playing. Be a gentleman about it, essentially. Yeah. So I could see him just being plunked on LTIR until that deal is up, and then maybe he finds another role somewhere else in the league. It's not like he's not an NHL player. Just a super unfortunate situation in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and here's the thing. To answer the initial question here, I agree with you. I think there's a very good chance that he doesn't, because even if all things go well and he returns at the very beginning of his timetable in mid-November, and he's ready to go, he's ready to practice, he's ready to get back up to speed, it'll have been nearly a year since he had played in a single game, right? Even Jesse Puljujärvi, who had double hip resurfacing surgery, when he was coming back, it was since the end of that season, right? He played in the playoffs for Carolina that year, and then he came back in, January that he eventually started playing, but he was signed to the Penguins at the end of December. He was starting to make his return into January and February, and then he was playing, and according to the Penguins, he was playing without pain the rest of the season. Now, there's a chance that Matt Nieto is the same thing. He comes back, he has a really long ramp-up period, just like Jesse Puljujärvi did, and eventually he makes his way back to the roster. But at that point, I mean, will the Penguins have an answer on the fourth line by then? You certainly hope so. I mean, the Penguins want to go younger. If they're able to find third liners, say Poulin or somebody else comes in, they sign Max Domi, which would make me very happy, and they have a third line center, then Lars Eller's on the fourth line. Matt Nieto, Nola Chari gets bumped over to wing on the fourth line, and you have that left spot for Jesse Puljujärvi, Jonathan Gruden, all showing to be capable guys at the bottom of a lineup. So there's a chance there's not even a spot for him next season by the time that he does return. And it's, again, unfortunate. You feel awful for the guy because you only get 22 games. You signed a 2-year contract and you might have only gotten 22 games out of it. You have to undergo surgeries on both knees. That is a miserable, miserable stretch there for Matt Nieto. And from all intents and purposes, everything that we've heard about the guy is that he's a terrific guy. He's, salt of the earth, great teammate, has been, loved by teammates in both San Jose and Colorado Avalanche before coming to Pittsburgh. So, you feel bad for the guy, but there is a solid chance that he doesn't suit up for the Penguins again. I think with this news that it's almost, in my eyes, guaranteed that he doesn't get bought out this year. Don't think he would be part of a trade, because I don't think it's going to cost anything for the Penguins to keep him. That $900,000 can get plopped on LTIR. And like you mentioned, Horwat, it just might not come off of it.
Yeah, if he's part of a trade, he'll be a throw-in piece as part of possibly a bigger one, because of no one's going to take just Matt Nieto at this point. Not, again, like you said, nothing against the guy. It is just the situation. That's terrible. He's not what is a team going to give up for taking on that contract? Now, we've seen teams like Arizona do it before, but Utah's trying to actually build something, so they're out of the question.
Well, yes, but we also, the Penguins also traded Rem Pitlick for a conditional 7th round pick, and they didn't meet the condition. So the Penguins traded Rem Pitlick for air, literally.
And that was a bigger contract too. That was $1 million at
Yeah.
least. Matt Nieto's at least making 900,000. It's just an unfortunate situation. I just don't see it happening, and like I said, unless he's a throw-in, because there is still the chance that he does come back and can play this
And
season.
wants to play. Yeah.
And wants to play. There is no doubt about that. So maybe a team looks at it as maybe we could use an extra, like, here's the whole package, and then Matt Nieto can be a part of something down the line, down the stretch. But that's just one way of looking at it, but that just seems unlikely. It just sounds like it's LTIR for him, and then that's all she wrote. And it's just extremely unfortunate. Everyone has to feel bad for the guy.
Yeah, and we'll see how things play out. And perhaps December rolls around. He's looking really good. He's feeling really good. Both of his knees are feeling really good. And the Penguins don't have an answer on the fourth line. At that point, there's an opportunity for Nieto, but you would have to assume, especially with some of the performances you've seen, and you're hoping that the Penguins can kind of backfill that forward core, knowing that they don't want to do the idea that they did last summer, which was bottom six defense, top six offense. Let's do offense all the way through. You would have to imagine they get some better players that'll bump other guys down the lineup and potentially bump the need for Matt Nieto completely out of the way. So we'll see what happens with this. Obviously, we'll have to revisit it I'm sure training camp will get some updates.
Yeah, see what's there.
But as of right now, nothing on Matt Nieto until November, December at the earliest.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. He was around the team the entire year. It's not like he wasn't, there. He was present for all those events that they did. He was present on the ice on occasion, doing his own workouts and staying in shape. So we'll see where it goes. He was definitely part of the team. It's not like he was, sectioned off to do his own thing.
Yep. So obviously, thoughts go out to all three of these players, Matt Nieto, John Ludvig, and Kris Letang, in their recoveries from surgery. Hopefully it all goes well, because as we've seen, if it doesn't, it can be really tough for everybody out there. For any surgery, it's tough, but let alone for these professional athletes that just want to go, and being pulled back. The amount that some of these guys have been pulled back is unfortunate and hard to deal with. But let's finish this episode talking a little bit on a high note about Brayden Yager. We've talked about Brayden Yager a heck of a lot, because he's one of the only players in the Penguins organization that's still doing things at this stage of the game. Yes, there's everybody over there at the WHL World Championships. I gave some updates on Tuesday. We'll continue to give updates as that tournament rolls on. A very long tournament that I don't remember it being this long, but hey, typically the Penguins have been in the playoffs, so we haven't had to worry about it. But let's talk about Brayden Yager, because his Moose Jaw Warriors win the WHL Championship with a 4-2 win to complete the championship sweep over the Portland Winterhawks. They finished the WHL playoffs with a 16-4 record, 2 sweeps, including the first and last rounds, and had one of the best playoff series of all time on any level against the Saskatoon Blades in the Eastern Conference Championship. 6 of those 7 games ending in overtime, including a Game 7 winner that sent the Moose Jaw Warriors to the championship series. Horwat, what are your thoughts on Brayden Yager taking home some hardware here in the 2023-24 season?
It's awesome to see. And like you said, he's the only Penguin in the organization still playing, essentially, outside of the IIHF. And he's looked good. He's not even leading the team in points, and yet he's got a ton. It's been a good run to the Memorial Cup. I believe it is the Moose Jaw Warriors' first ever appearance, let alone their first WHL championship. Because I know sometimes the host cities, there's
2 in the host, whatever
it is. But they are in the tournament for their first time, I believe, and that's a step in the right direction in the first place. And like I said, those numbers, there's a lot of talk that we have been having that maybe he could crack the NHL lineup, whether it be for the 9-game stint. Maybe he stays because he's that good. There's going to be a lot on his plate this summer, whether it is prospect camp, prospect tournaments, NHL training camp. He'll be a huge name to keep an eye on, because he is an in-house option for filling roles possibly. And leading the way for his junior team, and the way he was the sportsmanship award he took home for the 2nd straight year, and now is looking to help lead his Moose Jaw Warriors to a Memorial Cup championship, which it's one of the toughest trophies to win in the sport, apparently. So see where it goes. And again, more hockey to for Penguins fans to keep an eye on. And that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you mentioned it's one of the hardest trophies to win in hockey simply because you have to go through a Stanley Cup playoff-esque tournament just to get through your league in the WHL. And then you go to the CHL, which includes the Q and the OHL, and you take on the other champions, and you have to take out the other champions. So it's going to be an interesting Memorial Cup. I'm intrigued to see what Moose Jaw is able to do because the OHL champion London Knights also swept the championship series, and whoever won the Q, I can't remember, they also swept the QMJHL championship series.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of dominance coming into this Memorial Cup. Should be interesting to see how Brayden Yager stacks up, but Yager specifically finished the playoffs with 27 points, 11 of those being goals in 20 games. And so far on this season at the WHL level, 122 points, 46 goals, 76 assists in 77 games. Almost an assist per game for Brayden Yager. And oh yeah, he's been touted as being one of the better 200-foot players in the CHL. So the Penguins have themselves a blue chip prospect in Brayden Yager. And the one thing that people mentioned about him last season in his draft year was his goal numbers took a dip. His overall points were up, but that was because he was focusing on becoming a complete player heading into the draft. This year, he put it all together. Those goal numbers skyrocket from 28 to 35. He adds on 10 more assists, and like we mentioned, 95 points in the regular season for Brayden Yager. What a season for him, and it's going to be a fun offseason. It's going to be a fun summer to keep along with what he does, because last year, he looked like one of the top guys up in Buffalo at the Prospects Tournament. What does he do this year, considering the jump that he has had from last year to this year? Can he make a similar jump from this year to next year? And what does that jump look like? Does it look like a contributing bottom six player at the National Hockey League level, or does it look like him absolutely owning the WHL for another season?
It'll be interesting to see because of that awkward cutoff date. That sucks, really, because
literally just underneath it. And I understand that it's probably by design from Moose Jaw in that first season when he played 24 games and 25 would have given him AHL of eligibility next year. But, you know, that is also by 3 days on the date of birth is tough.
It is what it is, though. And it's something that you just got to play through, got to figure out. And, you know, if he needs that other year to continue developing, continue getting his feet wet in just good hockey and keep playing, because the Penguins don't like not playing their top guys or top prospects anyway, then there's a bullet they'll just have to take, and that's fine. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do this summer. Maybe he contributes. Maybe he retains an NHL spot for the season. This isn't a guy you want to burn a year of his contract for. So if he stays up, it's because he's worth it. Again, long summer to get through still. We'll see how he performs at that prospect camp, at that prospect tournament. And with the NHL, also I'm saying prospect tournament like they're guaranteed to go. We don't know yet. I keep forgetting that's sort of a yearly decision. That being said, he just needs to look comfortable and impress in any time he's around anyone with a Penguins logo on their chest. And he can do that. There's a good chance that we see him for 9, maybe more games in the NHL this upcoming season.
Yeah, and Kyle Dubas mentioned on a couple of occasions with the GM show with Josh Getzoff that what he wants to see is guys like Yager, guys like Pickering, guys like Tristan Brose. He wants to see if they can elevate their team to wins, to winning championships, because that's what he wants in the organization. Well, Yager has a WHL championship under his belt since Dubas said that, and Tristan Brose has an NCAA championship under his belt since Dubas said that. So Penguins getting a lot of winners in their prospect pool. It's nice to see that start to develop and start to become better. It's not one of the best. It's probably still in the 20s. If you look at it, you know, Scott Wheeler of the Athletics rankings or anybody's rankings, elite prospects rankings, I'm sure it's still in the 20s, but they're getting a lot more names. They're getting a lot more excitement generated from their prospect pool, and that's always a good thing. We mentioned that Brayden Yager's going to the Memorial Cup. Horwat, I told you this before we started the show. He becomes the first Penguins prospect to play in the Memorial Cup since 2022. I thought that was going to go back a lot longer when I started looking at that. I was like, all right, 2023, nobody. 2022, oh, there's actually 2 Penguins prospects that played for the Memorial Cup in the championship, no less, in 2022, and that's Ravis Ansons, who played and won for the St. John Sea Dogs, and Avery Hayes, an interesting name to keep an eye on. He had a great Memorial Cup run in 2022, 30-some points for him in a runner-up bid for the Hamilton Bulldogs, and he impressed some guys at Penguins training camp, so we'll see what he's able to do this next upcoming season, but maybe another sneaky name to keep an eye on, maybe not next year, but maybe in a couple of years as somebody who could, the Penguins have their Mark Donks. They have their whatever else you want to call them. They have those guys that, materialize out of nowhere. Avery Hayes has a lot of skill. We'll see if he can develop into somebody that eventually becomes an NHL catalyst for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that is going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.